So I guess what would you say to a company who hasn't defined their core values? They're like, it seems like a wasted time. It's the mushy stuff. And I think that's key to have a nice, happy place for everyone to work where we think the same on these things. And so from the other companies I've talked to, CEOs who have done this, if they've never talked about core values before and they go get clear on them and align their team, often there's about 20 to 25% of their team either has to be fired or will kind of self-opt out because they're like, no, I just, that's not for me. And it's not right or wrong. It's not like a moral, ethical kind of thing. And we're not talking about table stakes, like honesty and integrity. Like that's just table stakes. That's not a core value. Enron had those sorts of words on their wall, and we know where they ended up. So I think it's identifying the culture and attracting the people we want and repelling the people we don't want. And that will shine through in the marketing and how we show up everywhere. Welcome back to the Top Left podcast, where we discuss all sorts of leadership topics for the tech community, especially MSPs, agile leadership, team building, lots of wonderful things, what's going on in our world, in our clients' world, etc. So today is my co-host Steve Pasiciel is with me, and we want to talk about core values. So why are core values important? I guess let's start with the basics, the fundamentals. What have you seen with that, Chris or Steve? Sorry, when were how many meetings of people going on? So
people mistake me for that name all the time. It's okay. Yeah. So core values. I mean, it's really interesting because we always ask the question, don't we, Wim? How do we operationalize them, or how do we make them a part of our daily culture, right? And there's a couple things that come to mind right off the bat. It's probably about three and a half years ago. We made the fundamental shift away from the word values to using the word habits. And that was a key decision that you made, Wim, to take us away from just words or sentences on a wall or on some kind of a splashy document to where we could actually think about living these things out in our daily lives. And so what used to be values, and I think we had 5 or 6 what we called core values. And now you've narrowed them down to 4 habits. We sometimes use the words interchangeably, values and habits, but really they're habits. So that's the first thing I think about, is making that key strategic shift. The second thing that I think we've done a pretty good job around here of operationalizing them in this way. Throughout the course of our quarterly performance reviews, we actually make those part of the process of rating our people and inviting them into a situation where they are actually setting goals specific to the habits. So every quarter in our reviews, we say, hey, do you agree with the habits? Do you understand them? And we get them to talk about it and give themselves a rating. And then we ask them questions like, okay, in this upcoming quarter, what are a couple ways that you want to focus on these? And so we get them to set goals relative to the habits specifically. And I really like the way that we do it too, because we encourage them not just to think about the habits relative to their work, but it could be in their personal life as well, because we see the value in them thinking along those lines too. So those are just a couple of things off the top of my head, Wim, that we've done to operationalize our habits, at least at the company.
Yeah, I've been pretty happy with the progress we've made with refining the core value itself, how we word it. So it's action oriented, like continuous improvement. How do you do that every day? It's hard to do that. Whereas phrasing it as better today than yesterday is really clear just from that alone. And then unpacking the 5 behaviors or characteristics of that, so they know more about what that means and they can latch onto something there. So yeah, we've tied into hiring and firing and everything, performance, and how to level up and what these things really mean. So I guess what would you say to a company who hasn't defined their core values? They're like, it seems like a wasted time. It's the mushy stuff. And I think that's key to have a nice, happy place for everyone to work where we think the same on these things. And so from the other companies I've talked to, CEOs who have done this, if they've never talked about core values before and they go get clear on them and align their team, often there's about 20 to 25% of their team either has to be fired or will kind of self-opt out because they're like, no, I just, that's not for me. And it's not right or wrong. It's not like a moral, ethical kind of thing. And we're not talking about table stakes, like honesty and integrity. Like that's just table stakes. That's not a core value. Enron had those sorts of words on their wall, and we know where they ended up. So I think it's identifying the culture and attracting the people we want and repelling the people we don't want. And that will shine through in the marketing and how we show up everywhere. But that can be the tipping point on somebody who might look like an A player with, let's say, technical skills or sales performance, but they're rubbing everybody the wrong way. There's tension, there's toxicity, hurts the morale, but you can't get rid of the person because their numbers say you should keep them. That's why core values, but it takes a lot of work to institutionalize them, that the team owns them. So yeah, one of the things we're getting into is bringing even more attention to them with weekly themes, looking at aspects, and that's based on presentation at our recent bootcamp. We had Jamieson West on from Connect Strat talking about operationalizing your core values, having a whole habit guide, culture guide, and just going through that every week, different themes, different aspects of each core value. So sharing the stories, the wins, hours, acknowledging how people are bringing that into life. So I'm looking forward to see how that impacts us in the next year.
Yeah, one of the things I would add to that, you asked the question, what would we say to other companies that are on the journey of exploring their values and how to make them part of their culture? I think the word culture is slowly and unfortunately becoming cliche because we talk about it a lot, we use the word a lot. And so even in interviews that I give when we're bringing on new team members, some of them have the experience and the wisdom to ask the question, tell me about your culture. We point right away to our habits because that defines our culture. Yeah, we talk about words like you said, Wim, honesty, we talk about integrity, but those, like if we're not, as companies, if we're not operating with those things, you call them table stakes, then what are we even doing? Like we shouldn't even be a viable company if we're not, if we don't have honesty, integrity, loyalty, and those types of things as part of our DNA. But you're right in that that's not enough. And how do you make honesty daily part of your life without saying, yeah, we want to be honest in every part of our work in our life, but to create sentences, phrases, words like we want to be better today than yesterday, all of a sudden there's an obligation now for us to actually do something about that. You just say the word honesty, you don't have to do anything about it. You're either honest or you're not. But to actually sit down and think, okay, how am I going to be better today than I was yesterday? Then you've all of a sudden operationalized a core value.
Yeah.
So when we talk about culture, that's what we point to. And the other thing that I would say to companies that are thinking about this is we rush sometimes to talking about what's our vision and what's our mission, but we can't just form those things, vision and mission, in a vacuum. Like we have to have those things be based on something. And if we're not really clear on what our habits, our values are, then we can't properly craft a vision that makes sense, nor that is something that is going to be something that we're passionate about in perpetuity, because we can't say, here's our vision, and now let's think about values. Like it has to be the other way around. And so if we're unclear on those, then you have to take as much time and effort as you need to get clear on those, and then everything else falls into place.
Yep, exactly. But yeah, so that was my thought is these are not aspirational. It's not things that we want to necessarily add to the culture, but it's documenting, describing our best people. Often you're starting with your founders, your initial leaders, people who've been there a while, not necessarily because somebody could have been there 20 years, but they're actually toxic and not a fit. So they might logically agree with the core values, but not living it. So it's like, hey, it's just, but overall, the core values should be, or those habits are describing who we are today. Yes, that's where companies fall into a trap. And where I've been is they're trying to, hey, I want to have high customer success or customer friendly or different things, but it's not really native or congruent. And this goes nowhere because it's a bad energy. So it's describing who the company is. And it's not something that we're going to grow into. No, it's who we are today, our best people. If you want more of Joe, who's awesome and we love and want to keep forever, okay, how to describe Joe and what makes him tick? And then how do we find more people that are a close match to that?
Yeah. There's maybe you've seen this in the literature, whether it's on LinkedIn or just articles or other podcasts. There's a phenomenon that kind of started to take root last week or 2 weeks ago called quiet quitting. I don't know if you've come across that phrase at all, Wim, but the idea of quiet quitting is a phrase that was coined by someone who noticed that people who are no longer really bought into the core of the business. And so it's not like they're not doing their work. They're showing up, say it's a 9 to 5 job. They're showing up at 9, they're working hard, leaving at 5, but they're not going above and beyond. Like you can just tell in someone who's not really bought in and they're not really convinced of the value and the backbone of the company. They call it quiet quitting because they're there, but they're not really fully engaged. And they're not willing to think about, okay, what I'm going to do my job, but what do I need to do to go above and beyond and really maximize the effect that I'm having in the workplace? And so I think for companies who are concerned about the quiet quitters to really take a look in the mirror, but then also take a look at your values and what is it that you stand for? Because chances are people aren't quietly quitting because of a poorly crafted vision statement. Or they're not quietly quitting because there aren't good goals. They're quietly quitting because there's no longer a match between what they believe in and what they're passionate about and what the company is passionate about. And so if there's a disconnect, if companies see that happening in their teams, then look to the values. Look at what it is that you believe in at the core, and how you're communicating those and how people are engaging at that level.
Yeah, the word I've had for that is presenteeism. Good absenteeism. People aren't showing up, they're sick or whatever, taking lots of vacation, using up their bank time or whatever. But presenteeism is like they're showing up, they're clocking the hours, but they're not fully present and engaged.
Yep.
So I think it's a combination. It's the core values, but also meaningful work, clarity on their role, some deadlines, good rapport with their manager, those sorts of things. So yeah, we have to hit it from all sides there. But I like I think it was Jim Collins said that. Maybe it was Vern Harnish. But if you've got the right people and the right core value alignment and they're on the bus, so it's not about where the bus is going, the right people. So and I've seen that in our teams, is with the right people, they are already defining where to go. And it's fine. Like they'll drive it and get it there. Just let it run. It's my bus, but the people will kind of select the right driver and they'll go to a good destination. They'll be on the same page, as long as they're in tune on core values and relationships and teamwork, all of that. All of that. And you can get it the other way around, but the bus won't get there. You can have a great destination, but the wrong people and going in different directions, they're rowing upstream. It's just hard.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no doubt.
Okay. So, and yeah, obviously there's lots of books on this. If you look at Skilling Up, it's Vern Harnish. There's Traction EOS that gets into how to operationalize these. I think that was like a Brene Brown book that I read a few years ago that talked about operationalizing it, did a book study on that.
Yep.
Lots of great resources. It's worth the time. It may take several times to figure out. It's not hey, let's sit down for an hour and write it down. It can take a while to get the right words. And once you land on it, it'll be really powerful. You just feel it in your gut. You're like, yeah, this is it. And take it from there. So I think that's a good place to stop. And then,
I think so.
And then hopefully the next couple episodes, get to do some more of these leadership vision things as we get through our annual planning here in September 2022 and share some of those tools around vision, mission, planning, roadmaps, accountability, integration. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
If anything was useful here, drop us a note. You can find us on LinkedIn or email. And hey, if you want to hear more on a certain topic, let Steve or myself know, and we'll add that to the queue. And if you want to come on as a guest, then reach out as well. And we'll just have an open discussion like this. All right.
Awesome. Love it.
Next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.